A police officer in Seattle once walked the streets with strength and pride, until an injury left him leaning on crutches and living in silence after his wife's passing. He thought his life had no more purpose, until one stormy night he found a little girl and her loyal German shepherd shivering in the rain. That encounter, born in the darkest hour, would lead to a journey of danger, healing, and the unshakable power of chosen family. What followed would test the courage of a broken man, the faith of a child, and the loyalty of a dog who never wavered. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments so we can see how far this story travels. And if you believe no one should face the storm alone, hit that subscribe button, because what you are about to hear may restore your faith in love, miracles, and second chances. Seattle was drowning in rain that night, the kind of relentless downpour that seemed to wash every color into shades of gray. The wind from the nearby Puget Sound howled between the high-rises, carrying the salt and chill of the ocean, while the neon lights of convenience stores and gas stations blurred into streaks of orange and red against the soaked sidewalks. The streets glistened with water, cars hissed by on wet asphalt, and most citizens hurried home, hidden beneath umbrellas, their faces buried against the storm. Yet for Michael Carter, this was another ordinary night of duty, another night to lose himself in the work that kept his mind from wandering too far into the past. Michael Carter was 38 years old, a police officer who once had a reputation for being one of Seattle's most relentless detectives. Tall and broad-shouldered, with short, dark brown hair streaked with strands of early gray at the temples, his angular jaw often held a shadow of stubble. His hazel eyes, sharp and deep, carried the quiet weight of someone who had seen too much and lost too much. 2 years earlier, during a violent pursuit through an industrial district, Michael had been struck by a collapsing beam while shielding a civilian. The injury shattered his leg and left him unable to walk without the aid of crutches. Every step was now a measured, deliberate effort. Where once he had been swift and fearless, he now moved with a grim determination, his gait echoing both strength and limitation. He lived alone in a modest apartment near the waterfront, where gulls often cried in the morning and fog blanketed the skyline. His wife had died 3 years earlier in a car accident, and though people told him time would ease the ache, the apartment remained silent and hollow, filled only with old photographs and the faint scent of her perfume clinging to a scarf he had never managed to throw away. It was near midnight when his patrol car rolled slowly down the slick streets. Michael leaned on one crutch as he exited the vehicle to stretch, the rain soaking the brim of his jacket instantly. That was when he noticed them, two small figures huddled beneath the flickering awning of a corner convenience store. At first glance, he thought it might have been a stray animal seeking shelter from the storm. But as he drew closer, his hazel eyes narrowed against the rain, he saw the truth. A young girl sat pressed against the cold wall, her thin frame trembling violently under a tattered hoodie that was far too small for her. She could not have been more than 9 years old. Her hair was long, tangled, and dark chestnut, plastered to her pale cheeks by the rain. Wide brown eyes stared out into the night with a mixture of fear and fierce defiance. She clutched in her arms, not a blanket, but the thick neck of a German shepherd dog that stood like a sentinel in front of her. The dog was magnificent despite his ragged condition. About 5 years old, his black and tan coat was soaked through, clinging to a muscular body built for both power and agility. His amber eyes glowed in the dim streetlight, sharp and unblinking, and his erect ears twitched at every sound in the night. His name, Michael would soon learn, was Buddy. At that moment, Buddy was more guardian than pet, his teeth slightly bared, his body lowered in a protective stance, daring any stranger to approach the trembling child behind him. Michael tightened his grip on his crutch, lowering his other hand slowly in a gesture of peace. He had dealt with dangerous dogs in the past, but there was no mistaking the bond between this animal and the little girl. The dog's aggression was not born of malice, but of loyalty. He could feel it, almost like a current in the air between them. The girl's eyes darted toward Michael as he stepped closer, the rain dripping from his short hair and tracing the stubble along his jaw. She noticed immediately the way he leaned heavily on his crutches, the awkward rhythm of his steps. He wasn't the kind of police officer she had seen on television or in the movies, the ones who strode confidently, guns holstered at their sides. He seemed human, imperfect, yet steady in his presence. For the first time since she had been abandoned to the storm, she found herself pausing, watching this man who looked both strong and broken. "Hey there." Michael's voice was calm, low, carrying the patience of someone who had spoken to many frightened souls before. "You're both going to freeze out here." Buddy's growl rumbled, deep and warning, his fur bristling even in the rain. Michael stopped a few feet away, crouching as best he could with the crutch. His hand remained outstretched, fingers steady despite the cold. "Easy, boy," he said gently. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help." The girl pressed her cheek into Buddy's wet fur. "We're fine," she whispered, though her lips were blue from the cold and her voice cracked with exhaustion. Michael studied her. "What's your name?" The girl did not answer. Instead, she buried her face deeper into Buddy's neck, the dog's steady breathing filling the silence. Michael's heart clenched. He had seen this before, children too afraid to trust, too used to disappointment to believe in kindness. He shifted slightly, his crutch sinking in the puddle. "Listen," he tried again. "I know it doesn't look like it, but I've been where you are. Cold, alone, wondering if anyone out there actually cares. I care." Buddy's ears flicked at the tone of his voice. The growl softened into a low rumble, uncertain. Michael kept his hand outstretched, the rain dripping from his fingertips. After a long moment, Buddy sniffed the air, then stepped half a pace forward, his wet nose brushing Michael's knuckles. The growl ceased, replaced by a cautious silence. The girl's wide eyes blinked in surprise. She had never seen Buddy allow a stranger so close. She lifted her face slightly, the dim starlight reflecting in her tear-streaked cheeks. "His name is Buddy," she finally whispered, her voice so soft Michael almost missed it. "Buddy," Michael repeated gently, scratching the air just shy of the dog's ear until Buddy leaned into the touch. "That's a good name. Strong name." He looked at the girl again, his hazel eyes steady. "And what about you?" She hesitated, then finally said, "Emily." Michael nodded. "Emily. Pretty name." He glanced up at the storm raging around them. "Emily, I can't leave you two here. It's too cold, too dangerous. My apartment's not much, but it's warm, and you'll be safe." Emily clutched Buddy tighter, searching Michael's face for deception. But all she saw was a tired man with rain dripping into his eyes, standing on crutches yet still offering them shelter. For reasons she couldn't explain, something in her chest loosened, a tiny flicker of trust. Michael smiled faintly, holding out his hand toward her this time. "Just for tonight. You can both leave in the morning if you want. No strings." Buddy pressed his wet head against Emily's shoulder as if giving his silent approval. Emily looked at him, then at Michael's hand, and finally nodded once, slow but firm. Michael exhaled, relief mixing with the rain on his lips. He straightened with effort, leaning on his crutch, and gestured toward his car. "Come on, let's get you both out of this storm for the first time in years." As Emily rose to her feet with Buddy at her side, Michael felt the faintest warmth in his hollow chest, the sense that destiny had just placed something precious in his path. The rain had not stopped by the time Michael pulled his patrol car into the small underground garage of his apartment building. The storm hammered the metal roof above like a relentless drum, and every gust of wind made the walls tremble faintly. Emily sat in the back seat, her arms locked tightly around Buddy's thick neck, the dog panting softly beside her, water dripping from his fur onto the worn upholstery. She had not said a word during the drive, her eyes fixed on the streaks of rain that blurred the city lights. Michael, balancing himself on his crutches, guided them upstairs to his modest apartment on the 3rd floor. The place was as simple as it was lonely. A single bedroom, a narrow kitchen with chipped counters, a small living room dominated by a faded couch, and walls bare except for a few framed photographs. One photo showed a smiling woman with auburn hair and gentle green eyes standing beside Michael, her arm linked through his. Emily's gaze lingered on it for a moment, curiosity flickering in her tired eyes before she turned away. Buddy entered cautiously, sniffing every corner, circling the space like a soldier on duty. Once satisfied, he padded back to Emily's side and leaned against her legs. The girl sat silently on the couch, clutching the damp hem of her hoodie, her eyes darting toward Michael whenever he moved. Michael knew she would not open up easily. He remembered enough from his years on the force children like Emily carried invisible scars that could not be erased by warm meals or soft blankets alone. Still, he had to start somewhere. He prepared some soup from a can, the steam curling into the air as he set the bowl in front of her. "Eat while it's hot," he said gently. Emily hesitated, then slowly lifted the spoon. Buddy watched every motion, his amber eyes alert, as though making sure the food was safe. Later that night, Michael stood near the window, listening to the rain. He tapped a message on his phone and soon after heard a knock on the door. When he opened it, Sarah Miller stepped in, carrying a canvas tote slung over her shoulder. Sarah was 35, a tall woman with a slender frame that often seemed weighed down by her own thoughts. Her long black hair was streaked with strands of silver that she never bothered to dye, pulled back tonight into a loose bun. Her eyes were sharp and dark, a little sunken, as if sleepless nights had carved themselves permanently into her features. Sarah had been Michael's colleague for nearly a decade, a detective with a reputation for compassion in cases involving children. That compassion, however, was born from hardship. She had lost her younger brother to neglect years ago, and though she rarely spoke of it, everyone knew it shaped her fierce protectiveness toward the vulnerable. "Another stray?" she asked softly, her gaze falling immediately on Emily and Buddy. The girl shrank back, pressing closer to the dog. Sarah's tone softened. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." Michael closed the door behind them. "Found them outside the store," he said. "Didn't feel right to leave them out there." Sarah crouched near the couch, careful not to approach too quickly. She pulled from her tote a notebook, a box of crayons, and a clean towel. "I thought she might want these," she murmured, setting them gently on the table. Emily's eyes flickered with cautious interest at the crayons, but her hands remained folded tightly in her lap. Buddy sniffed the towel, gave a short grunt of approval, then returned to his post by her side. As the night deepened, Sarah carefully asked Emily simple questions, her name, her age, whether she was hungry. Emily responded in clipped phrases, her voice no more than a whisper. She revealed only fragments. Her mother was gone, her father had left, and Buddy was all she had. Sarah exchanged a glance with Michael, both recognizing the weight in those words. Children rarely said such things unless truth had carved them deep. When Emily shifted slightly, the sleeve of her hoodie slid back, revealing faint lines etched across her wrist and forearm. Sarah's breath caught, her eyes narrowing. They were not fresh, but they were unmistakable old scars from injuries, the kind too straight to be accidents. She said nothing at first, only reached quietly for the towel and began to dry Buddy's fur. Her hand brushed along his hind leg, where she noticed a pronounced scar above the paw, the kind that might come from a heavy kick or an old wound left untreated. Sarah finally met Michael's gaze again, her eyes hard. "They've both been through something," she said in a low voice. Michael nodded grimly, his jaw tight. He knew it the moment he saw them, but hearing it confirmed was a knife twisting deeper into his conscience. To lighten the tension, Sarah slid the notebook across the table toward Emily. "Sometimes drawing helps," she said gently. Emily hesitated, then picked up a crayon. Slowly, with Buddy's head resting against her knee, she began to draw. Her hand moved with surprising steadiness for someone so young. When she turned the page toward them, the sketch revealed a small figure of a girl, a large dog with pointed ears, and a tall man leaning on crutches. Michael stared at the image, struck silent. Emily avoided his eyes, but the meaning was clear. She already saw him not just as a stranger, but as part of their fragile world. The storm outside grew wilder, branches scraping against the building as if claws were raking the walls. Sometime past midnight, when Sarah had gone and Michael had begun to doze in his chair, Buddy stiffened. The dog's head shot up, ears erect, muscles tense. A low growl rolled from his chest, his eyes locked on the shadow shifting outside the curtained window. Emily froze, clutching his fur. Michael, roused instantly, reached for his crutches and moved to the window. He pulled back the curtain just enough to glimpse the blurred outline of a figure lingering near the alley. The moment the curtain shifted, the figure melted back into the darkness, gone as though it had never been there. Buddy barked fiercely, the sound sharp and protective, his body positioned between Emily and the door. Michael's heart pounded. This was no coincidence. Someone was watching. He lowered the curtain, his face grim, and turned to Emily, who was trembling. "It's okay," he said firmly, though unease gnawed at him. Buddy saw him. "We'll be ready next time." The storm eased by dawn, leaving Seattle shrouded in mist. The streets glistened as if painted in silver, rainwater trickling into drains while gulls wheeled above the harbor. From his living room window, Michael watched the world stir to life. The gray skyline rose against the morning haze, the smell of wet asphalt drifting in with the damp air. His apartment, once a mausoleum of silence, now carried a different rhythm, softer, warmer, alive. Emily sat cross-legged on the faded rug, Buddy sprawled beside her with his head resting on her lap. She hummed quietly as she colored in the notebook Sarah had left the night before. Her face, though still thin and pale, seemed more animated in the morning light. Buddy's tail thumped lazily against the floor each time she stroked behind his ears. Michael leaned on his crutches, watching them with a faint smile tugging at his lips, a sight he had not realized he missed until now. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. Where his apartment had been echoing with absence, it now pulsed with small sounds. Emily's laughter when Buddy rolled over for a belly rub, the scrape of crayons, the bark that startled him when Buddy heard the mailman. Emily had begun calling the place the safe house, her words simple but cutting straight into Michael's heart. She would whisper it almost reverently, as if testing the weight of safety in her mouth for the first time. Still, unease clung to Michael's thoughts. He knew the system. Taking in a child, even temporarily, meant paperwork, questions, oversight. He wondered how long he could shelter Emily before social services intervened. Would they tear her away to a foster home? Would they see him, an injured cop with crutches and a haunted past, as unfit to care for a child? Yet each time he heard her laugh, each time Buddy's amber eyes locked with his as if urging him to hold on, Michael found the strength to push those fears back, if only for a little while. Later that afternoon, Emily approached him shyly. "Can we go outside? Buddy likes the park." Michael hesitated. The park meant people, questions, exposure. But Emily's hopeful gaze, paired with Buddy's eager stance by the door, broke down his resistance. "All right," he said, "just for a little while." The park was only a few blocks away, nestled between rows of old townhouses and a line of cherry trees still slick with rain. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of damp earth and the faint perfume of blossoms beaten down by the storm. Michael maneuvered slowly along the path with his crutches while Emily and Buddy darted ahead, the girls' laughter carrying on the breeze. For a moment, passers-by might have mistaken them for an ordinary family, an injured father, his child, and their loyal dog. The thought stirred something raw in Michael's chest, a mixture of longing and disbelief. As Emily ran toward the swings, Buddy suddenly stopped, nose pressed to the ground. His body stiffened, tail rigid, and he began pawing at a patch of earth near the roots of an old oak. "Buddy, no!" Emily called, but the dog ignored her, digging furiously until his paws scraped against something metallic. Michael limped closer, his breath catching as the soil gave way to reveal the edge of a rusted metal box. With Emily's help, they pulled it free, its surface caked with mud. Emily's eyes widened with curiosity, her hands trembling as she pried it open. Inside were a stack of photographs curled with age and a folded piece of paper with faded writing. The photographs showed Emily as a toddler, smiling uncertainly beside a tall man whose face was partly shadowed. His features were sharp dark hair, angular jaw, but there was something unsettling in his gaze, something distant and cold. Emily's breath hitched when she saw him, recognition flickering in her eyes. She clutched the photos to her chest but said nothing. Michael unfolded the paper carefully. A single name was scrawled across it in rough handwriting. David R. Hale. The name meant nothing to him yet, but it sent a chill down his spine. He slipped the paper back into the box, his instincts whispering that this was no coincidence. Someone had hidden it here, and Buddy had been the one to uncover it. Emily tugged at his sleeve, her face pale. "That's him," she whispered. "That's my dad." Michael studied her, the weight of her confession heavy in the cool air. He placed the box gently back into the soil, covering it again. "We'll figure this out," he said firmly, though his mind raced with questions. Why had the box been buried? Why here? And why had Buddy been drawn to it so fiercely? On the walk home, Emily remained unusually quiet, Buddy pressed protectively against her side. Michael felt the tension in the leash, the dog's body vibrating with alertness, as if he sensed unseen eyes upon them. When they returned to the apartment, Emily climbed onto the couch with Buddy, curling beneath an old quilt. Michael stood at the window, watching rain begin to fall again in light sheets. For the first time in years, a fragile sense of joy flickered inside him as he listened to the gentle sound of Emily's laughter echoing softly while Buddy nudged her hand. And though doubts clawed at his mind about guardianship, about responsibilities he wasn't sure he was strong enough to bear, He couldn't deny the truth staring him in the face. His home was no longer silent. The next morning, Michael placed the rusted box on his kitchen table. The paper inside still smelled faintly of damp earth, and the photographs seemed to radiate a kind of menace the longer he stared at them. He didn't recognize the name David R. Hale, but the way Emily had whispered, "That's my dad," lingered in his ears like an echo. He knew he could not handle this alone. Sarah came by later, her long black hair pulled into a tight braid this time, her expression lined with fatigue from another sleepless night. She dropped her trench coat onto the chair and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You said Buddy dug this up?" she asked, scanning the photos. Her sharp eyes took in every detail, every shadow. Michael nodded, balancing on his crutches as he moved to pour coffee. He didn't stop until he found it. Almost like he knew where it was, Sarah lifted one of the pictures and frowned. David Hale. That name rings a bell. I think Vice had an open case on him, low-level enforcer for one of the smaller gangs near Tacoma. He disappeared a couple of years ago after a drug bust went wrong. Word was, he turned on his own crew and vanished before anyone could take him out. Emily, sitting on the couch with Buddy pressed against her side, stiffened at Sarah's words. Her small hands tightened around the sketchbook in her lap. "He's not gone," she whispered. "He finds me sometimes, even when I hide." The weight of her words silenced the room. Michael leaned heavily on his crutches, his jaw set. If he's still around, then she's not safe. Sarah sighed, running a hand across her forehead. "We can run his name through the system, see if there's any activity. But if he's smart, he's off the grid, and if he's desperate, he'll come looking for her again." Michael looked down at Emily. "That's why we have to be ready." The following days stretched taut with tension. Michael filed quiet inquiries through his old contacts in Vice, and Sarah dug through databases late into the night. What they found painted a grim picture. David Hale had been involved in smuggling operations, muscle-for-hire work, and had a history of domestic abuse. The records were fragmented, but they were enough to confirm what Michael had already begun to fear. Emily's father was dangerous, and he would not stop until he had her. Despite the dark clouds gathering, life inside the apartment struggled toward a fragile normal. Emily continued to draw, filling page after page with images of Buddy chasing butterflies, of herself on swings, of Michael standing tall on his crutches. Sometimes she would draw a shadowy figure far in the background, a man with hollow eyes watching from the trees. She never explained those sketches, but Michael didn't need to ask. Buddy seemed to sense the unease, too. He stayed close to Emily's side at all times, his ears twitching at every sound in the hallway. One night, when Michael stirred awake to fetch water, he found the German Shepherd lying directly in front of Emily's door like a sentry, eyes half open, chest rising and falling in steady vigilance. The attack came a week later. It was late evening, the city already swallowed by drizzle and fog. Michael was sorting through a stack of reports Sarah had dropped off when Buddy suddenly erupted into barking deep, thunderous, furious. The sound reverberated off the walls. Emily screamed from the living room, and when Michael rushed in, leaning heavily on his crutches, he saw the window half open, the curtains flapping violently. A figure in a dark jacket was trying to pull Emily through. "Dad!" Emily's voice cracked, a mix of terror and disbelief. Before Michael could reach them, Buddy launched forward, a blur of black and tan fur. His teeth sank into the man's sleeve, pulling him back with a force that surprised even Michael. The intruder cursed, his face briefly visible in the dim light, hard, gaunt, with stubble covering a square jaw and wild, darting eyes. He looked older than the photos, but unmistakably the same man. "Get off!" David Hale snarled, striking at Buddy with his free arm. The dog refused to let go, growling, the sound vibrating through the air. Emily was sobbing, pulling herself back into the room, while Michael struggled forward, his crutches thudding against the floor. In that chaos, a siren wailed outside, Sarah's car pulling into the lot. The intruder yanked his arm free, leaving his jacket torn and Buddy snapping at air. With a last glare through the window, David disappeared into the night, swallowed by the rain before Sarah could even reach the stairs. Michael collapsed into the nearest chair, his chest heaving, while Buddy returned to Emily, circling her protectively. Sarah burst into the apartment moments later, her coat plastered with rain, her eyes sharp with fury. "Was that—" "Yes," Michael interrupted, his voice hoarse. "Her father. The apartment seemed to shrink around them that night. Emily clung to Buddy, her tears soaking into his fur. She looked at Michael with wide, red-rimmed eyes. "Please," she begged, "don't let him take me. Don't let him take Buddy. If you don't leave us, I won't be scared anymore." Michael felt something break inside him at her words. He reached out, his calloused hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "You and Buddy are safe with me." Sarah placed a firm hand on Michael's arm. "You realize what this means. He's not going to stop. If you want to keep her safe, you can't just be the guy who took her in for a night. You need to fight for her. Legally. Permanently." Michael looked at his crutches, at the walls of his small apartment, at the life he had let shrink after his wife's death. Could he really become a father, broken as he was? He met Sarah's eyes, and she spoke softly, but with conviction. "You may walk on crutches, but your heart is stronger than most men I know. You can do this. You can be her family." For the first time in years, Michael didn't doubt it. He knew he had to try. Spring crept gently into Seattle, the rain still falling but no longer carrying the bitter edge of winter. And on certain mornings, the clouds parted just enough for sunlight to bathe the streets in gold. Michael Carter leaned on his crutches as he entered the small physical therapy clinic, a place that smelled faintly of antiseptic, rubber mats, and determination. The walls were plastered with faded motivational posters, yet it wasn't the slogans that kept him moving, it was Emily's voice. The 9-year-old stood a few feet away, holding a cardboard sheet she had decorated with bright stars in crayon, each star representing one of his accomplishments. At the top, she had written in her uneven handwriting, "Daddy's progress board." "2 more steps, you can do it," she urged, her eyes wide with encouragement. Michael's leg trembled as he shifted his weight forward. First the crutch, then his foot, then the next, his breath uneven, his brow damp. Yet the pride in Emily's gaze was enough to carry him through the pain, and Buddy, the 5-year-old German shepherd with his thick black and tan coat and amber eyes, sat loyally at her side, tail thumping rhythmically against the floor as if marking each step of his master's progress. When Michael finally sank into a chair, chest heaving, Emily rushed forward and pressed another star to the board, announcing firmly, "You're getting stronger." He smiled tiredly and ruffled her hair. "Stronger because I have you two," he said, and for once the words didn't feel like an attempt at reassurance, but a simple truth. The process of physical healing was one battle, but the legal process was a war of patience, paperwork, and scrutiny. Weeks later, Michael found himself seated in a wood-paneled office across from Margaret Lewis, the social worker assigned to Emily's case. Margaret was in her early 50s, with short silver hair that framed her square face and glasses perched low on her nose. Her expression was lined with the sternness of years spent evaluating fractured families, but beneath it was a softness that hinted at stubborn optimism. "Officer Carter," she said carefully, "taking custody of a child is a permanent commitment. The court will look at your injury, your financial stability, and whether you can provide a safe environment. Are you certain you want to move forward?" Michael straightened, his hands clasped tightly. "I know my limitations," he replied, "but I also know Emily won't be safe if she's sent back into the system. Her father is still out there. She needs more than temporary shelter. She needs a family." Margaret studied him in silence for a long moment, no stranger to empty promises. Yet when she had visited his apartment, she'd seen the fridge covered with Emily's drawings, Buddy curled faithfully at her feet, and Michael balancing his own struggles with unwavering dedication. Finally, she tapped her pen against the file and said, "I'll recommend the case move forward, but be prepared. The court won't be easy." On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse hummed with the quiet rustle of paper and the murmur of voices. Michael wore a suit, the fabric a little snug but freshly pressed. He moved with measured care on his crutches, each click echoing across the polished floor. Emily walked beside him in a yellow dress Sarah had helped her choose, her hair neatly combed, a ribbon tied loosely at the side. Buddy patted at her other flank, his coat brushed to a sheen, wearing a plain new collar. Sarah herself came along, tall and slender in a dark coat, her presence steady, eyes always scanning the environment like the detective she was, though they softened each time she glanced at Emily. Inside the courtroom, Judge Harold Whitmore presided. He was a man in his 60s with a balding head, a lined face, and a reputation for stern fairness. Adjusting his glasses, he looked down from the bench at Michael. "Officer Carter, you are petitioning to become the legal guardian of this child, Emily, and to register her German Shepherd, Buddy, as part of your household. Is that correct?" Michael met his gaze and answered firmly, "Yes, Your Honor." Whitmore's eyes flicked to the crutches. "You walk with difficulty. Do you truly believe you are physically capable of raising a child?" The question hung heavy, but Michael did not flinch. "I may not run as fast as I used to, but strength isn't only about speed. Strength is about showing up every day, no matter what. Emily doesn't need a perfect man. She needs someone who won't walk away. I can be that man." The judge regarded him skeptically, but before he could speak again, Emily stepped forward, her small hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table. Her voice wavered at first, then rang out clear and certain. "He is my family," she declared, tears glistening in her eyes. "Please don't make us leave him. Please don't take Buddy away. We belong together." The courtroom fell into a profound silence. Margaret Lewis dabbed at her eyes. Sarah pressed her lips tightly to keep them from quivering, and even the clerk paused mid-scribble. Buddy, as if understanding his role, let out a steady bark that echoed through the chamber, not fierce but resolute, as though sealing Emily's words with his own testimony. Judge Whitmore leaned back, his expression unreadable for a long moment. Then he nodded, a faint trace of warmth breaking through his stern demeanor. "Very well. The petition is approved. Custody of Emily Carter is hereby granted to Michael Carter. The German Shepherd, Buddy, will remain registered as part of the household. Court adjourned." The strike of the gavel reverberated through Michael's chest like a final chord of a long, unfinished song. Emily ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist, her tears wetting his shirt as she sobbed, "We did it!" Buddy pressed close, nosing Michael's free hand insistently, tail wagging in wild arcs. For the first time in years, Michael felt whole, not as a broken officer or a widower defined by loss, but as a father. Weeks later, on a rare, clear morning in Seattle, sunlight spilled through the cherry blossoms in the park, the petals shimmering like confetti as they drifted to the ground. Michael moved steadily down the path, his crutches tapping in rhythm, his gait more confident after weeks of therapy. Emily ran ahead, her yellow dress fluttering, laughter carrying across the open space. Buddy bounded around her, ears perked, barking joyfully at the bright world. Michael paused beneath a tree, tilted his face toward the sky, and let the warmth soak into his bones. The hollow loneliness that had haunted him was gone, replaced by laughter, loyalty, and the unshakable truth that family isn't always given, it can be chosen. He watched Emily spin in circles while Buddy leapt around her, and he knew that at long last, he was exactly where he belonged. At the end of this story, we are reminded that family is not only the one we are born into, but also the one we choose through love, sacrifice, and faith. Michael, Emily, and Buddy found each other in the darkest of nights, and what began as fear and loneliness became a miracle of healing. Many people would call it chance, but those who believe know it was the gentle hand of God, guiding broken souls together to form something whole. Just as light breaks through the clouds after rain, so too can His grace bring hope where there once was despair. In our everyday lives, we may not always notice the miracles, yet they are there, in a kind word, in a loyal friend, in a second chance we never thought possible. This story is a reminder to never lose faith, to open our hearts, and to trust that love, like God's light, will find us even in the storm. If this story touched you, we invite you to share it with others, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so more hearts can be lifted by stories of hope and faith. May God bless everyone who watched until the end, and if you believe in miracles, if you believe that no child and no soul should ever be abandoned, write Amen in the comments as a prayer and a testimony of faith.